Luke chapter 6 and verse 40. A pupil is not above his teacher, but everyone, after he has been fully trained, will be like his teacher. You cannot separate education and discipleship. Whoever is educating our children is discipling our children, which means whoever educates the majority of children is discipling the majority of children. And if the pupil is not above his teacher, and if everyone will ultimately be like his teacher, if we continue to send our children to Caesar for their education, we need to stop being surprised when they come home as Romans. From K through 12, children spend 14,000 seat hours in school. Let me say that again, 14,000 seat hours in school. Currently, the curriculum in schools is controlled by the government and teachers' unions. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Romans 12:2, listen to this. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Look at 2 Corinthians 10:5. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. We are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Is math a thought? Is science a thought? Is history a thought? Colossians 2:8, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the empty principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. Listen to this. 1 Timothy 6:20, O Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you, avoiding worldly and empty chatter and the opposing arguments of what is falsely called knowledge, which some have professed and thus gone astray from the faith. How can we look at these principles about the training of the mind and not apply them to the way that we educate our children? Listen to this. Government education was established around 1870, modeled after the Prussian format, rooted in secular humanism. It was opposed by American Christians for decades. First 50 years, the church fought tooth and nail against compulsory education and against government education. They knew better. As late as 1900, still 2/3 of all high school children were educated at home or the church. As late as the 1830s, it was noted in America that education was everywhere in the hands of the Protestant clergy. Education is not mentioned in the United States Constitution, but guess what is? The 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. The federal government has no constitutional jurisdiction over education. People with a Christian worldview, 11 times less likely to condone adultery, 15 times less likely to believe homosexuality is acceptable, 18 times less likely to condone drunkenness, 31 times less likely to condone premarital cohabitation, and 100 times less likely to endorse abortion. But because 90% of the people who call themselves Christians don't have a Christian worldview, we have to constantly remind them to act like what they are not. We're currently losing 75 to 88%, between 70 and 88% of young people by the end of their freshman year in college. Homeschool students remain in the faith of their fathers all the way through college, according to NARI, at a rate of 90 to 95%. Again, I don't write the mail, I just deliver it. People are always asking the same questions when they find out that we're a homeschool family. And these questions are rooted in the fact that they've been discipled by the system. What about socialization? Exactly, we get that, and that's the easy one, all right? What about socialization? The other question is that legal? And the other question is, where do you get your curriculum? Who oversees your curriculum? Those are the three questions. Why does everyone ask the exact same three questions? Because everyone's been discipled by the same teacher. Is that legal? Where does that question come from? That question comes from sheep who have forgotten that they are free men. We ask that question because we believe that children are wards of the state. We ask that question because we've been discipled by the system that says it owns us. And the first question everybody asks is, how can you educate your own children? Why? Why? Because the system wants you to be a slave. I'm a free man. My children are mine, not wards of the state. The government has no jurisdiction over my children.
Greetings, everybody. It's Armor of Truth Live number 211. Millions of students are under extreme levels of modern security surveillance technology in American public schools. This is also known as target hardening, right, at the schools. Harden that target so that whatever the perceived threat is can't get in. I think it's most likely that what they don't want to get in is knowledge. Drew Chambers of Columbia University argues that the use of, in American schools, again, also known as target hardening, this surveillance, modern surveillance, may do more harm than good. First, reliance on such technology may undermine more practical responses. Second, perhaps most concerning as an overall consequence, is the more it detracts from the main enterprise of what school is for, right? Teaching and learning. These highly invasive tactics are more likely to disrupt that process. The process which is supposed to be teaching and learning. Third, surveillance measures cause fear in students, and it inhibits a healthy development for the adolescent. Fourth, security technology has a unique capacity to harmfully alter the student-teacher relationship. So these arguments provide a much-needed dose of reality to combat the official narrative that says our schools must be locked down and all students must be tagged, tracked, traced, and their very thoughts monitored. No longer is school, if it ever was, a place where Americans are nurtured in life skills and trained in academics and vocations. That's not what the public school does any longer. The compulsory public education system in America today conditions our youngest into a globalist, collectivist worldview where they are taught to worship idols, the earth, sexuality, alternative lifestyles. And they're taught to embrace victimhood status as a personal ethic. So get them out. Armor of Truth Live number 211. Get them out now. The American school safety scam with special guest Voddie Baucham. I wish that was the case, but he was with us just a moment ago. I am your host, Brad from Carolina, and this is my lovely wife. Also with me, my co-host.
Hello, hello.
Co-laborer in the faith.
Indeed. It's good to be with everybody again.
All right. So tonight we've got several points to make to you, and Summer has some interesting points that we're going to get to after this first segment. So jump in here with your research if you've got if you've got a point where you want to add on here, because I'm going to talk.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as we start here, about a specific company, a company known as Gaggle. All right, look at that, Gaggle. That's the name of this company. It's a surveillance company.
Sounds like gag.
Yeah,
Gag order.
Well, check out this definition. What is a gaggle anyway? Now this, let me show you before I give you this definition. Let's look at the, we've got lots of good art for it, don't we? Mm-hmm. Let's listen to this before I tell you what a gaggle is. This is a company, one of the companies that does this modern surveillance. Now, let me also say this. Tonight, Summer and myself are going to be having to talk around some of the words, right? Because if we're talking about things that are happening in schools today, like
Well, look at what happened with Alex Jones, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So if we're talking about the V word and violence in this case, but and anything that happens in schools, we just have to be very careful on this platform, or the video will just get killed. It won't go anywhere. So we're going to be talking about tragic events, but we won't be using the direct language. So just know that as we go in. But now this is one of the companies that provides this surveillance service. So you're going to hear them talk about how useful their service is, and we're going to spend all night destroying that. So check this out.
In describing Gaggle in a couple words, it's easy for me. Life-saving, life-changing, family connecting.
Gaggle to our district is another set of hands that we don't have. It allows us to be able to do a multitude of jobs and to keep our children safe.
Listen to the language. What they're describing is an invisible entity that they count on, that they depend on, right? Another set of hands, but we don't ever see this being. This being is always there lurking, though, and keeping us safe.
And we don't have the manpower to do that ourselves.
Security and support are the two biggest words that come to mind for me.
I would say life-changing, I would say extraordinary, and I would say that the service is truly a partnership.
Gaggle partners with districts to help our kids stay safe and make good choices and know that they are seen and supported by the adults in their school system.
If I had to describe Gaggle in a few words, I would refer to you as our online guardian.
Gaggle is an important tool in your toolbox.
I just got to stop it there. Our online guardian. Hang on, let's hear her.
What's in their school system?
Check this
If
out.
I had to describe Gaggle in a few words, I would refer to you as our online guardian.
She stopped
Gaggle
just short of
is
calling
an
it guardian
important
angel.
Tool in your toolbox supporting school safety and student mental health.
I think of Gaggle as a partner and not a vendor. They're a partner with us in educating kids and supporting them.
If I were to describe Gaggle, I would describe it as powerful. I also think a word I would use is invisible. And I say that
Exactly.
because the best technology isn't taught.
I guess a word they might also use is transcendent, right? Transcendent.
Omnipresent.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
There you go.
There I am. I'm in the background. Omnipresent.
Right. Is that not what they're describing? They're describing an omnipresent, all-knowing being. I'll let them finish. Oops. Here we go.
About. It's there for your protection. It's run seamlessly.
Like a warm blanket over the district. Just keeping kids safe, caring, and helping students with issues before they really become issues.
Quite a few claims there that they've made. Of course, what are they going to say? They're talking about themselves. Of course, we expect them to. They're not going to say negative things about themselves, are they? No, but that's going to be our job tonight. Not negative things. We're going to tell you the truth. And so what is a gaggle? Well, a gaggle is, it's as a verb, it's to cackle. It's a kind of laugh. That was new to me. I didn't realize that. You see, I was schooled in the public education system, so I didn't know that yet. I had to learn that today. So gaggle, though, as a noun, is a noisy group or gathering, or a flock of geese when they're not flying, right? All together now?
Yeah, not flying.
When they're not flying.
Yeah. Very telling.
So it's a flock together. It's a unit. It's a collective, but they're not flying.
That's heavy, man. It's like you're in chains.
Yeah. Strange. All right, so let's look at a clip from, let's see. Let me go ahead and take a look here. Let you see the website. I want you to take notice of the Gaggle website. Once again, this is one of the companies that's doing the surveillance. Now, you know the stories that have been in the news for the past decade or more. These events that happen at schools that are tragic, sometimes very hard to believe, but I just want you to note, what's the mood? What is the mood? All right, is this a happy?
Well, it looks like mugshots.
Yeah, it looks like mugshots. It looks like these poor children are just about to fall apart. Every child looks like they're about to start crying. So that is some effective marketing right there. Because when you come to this website and you're a parent or an educator, you're going to get that sense of impending doom, right? So you're going to have to pay Gaggle a lot of money to come put smiles on the kids' faces. So let's go ahead and check out. Now, there was on Vice News, of course. That's where you get the hardcore truth, right? Vice. Anyway, they covered the school surveillance. It was titled, "They're Watching Us," inside the company surveilling millions of students. So Gaggle is one of the biggest. We didn't research who's the biggest, but we've got some other names for you. But we did focus in on this particular one. And here we want to, little introduction about Gaggle. And I want you to listen, and Summer's going to talk to us in depth about this a little later. Maybe give us a little rundown after this clip, if you don't mind.
Okay.
This is going to be, I think this is going to be the CEO. I want you to listen for the marketing of fear, the use of fear as a marketing tool. The virtue signaling, it's all there.
It's going to lead to self-harm and suicide or school violence.
He doesn't have any formal training in
Can
education.
you believe that guy? After we just sat here and talked about the words we can't say, this guy goes ahead and drops it.
Started Gaggle back in 1998 when he saw an opportunity to create an email provider for schools. Over the years, he's pivoted the company to meet the growing demand for school safety tools.
My company, Gaggle, works with schools and school districts across the country, and our job is to identify kids in crisis before tragedy happens.
Before tragedy happens, that might be the unique.
Pre-crime.
Is that the selling point? Think that's the unique selling point, perhaps? We identify tragedy before it happens.
We're here to save the day and prevent terrible things from happening.
It's Minority Report for schools.
There was a tidal wave of suicide headed our way. Fast forward to the pandemic, and things have gotten so much worse. So we're monitoring the school-based communication tools to look for any indication that a student might be in danger.
How much of it is really genuinely concerning when you go through it as a human, and how much is just kids being kids?
We pulled in about 10.1 billion items. Of that, there were about 200 million that had a concerning word or phrase.
10.1 billion?
Billion.
But that's like 9.8 billion pieces of content that are not relevant.
That's true. Yeah, but...
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right, yeah. But, of course, as you're going to hear all night, the argument is this. If it saves, what is it?
One life.
Just one life. Right? It's worth everyone.
Where have we heard that before?
Yeah. We're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
If it saves one life, then it's worth all of us living in a cave for the rest of our lives. Right? Being sheltered from any possible harm, it's worth it if it saves just one life. Well, we're going to take that seriously. Now, does Gaggle, what they do, are they responsible for saving any lives? In fact, what you heard so far, it seems like what Gaggle does, they don't offer any education services, but what they would say is we secure the atmosphere. We help to secure the context so that teaching and learning can take place. We're going to test that. Is that actually what's happening? Are they creating a peaceful, safe environment? Is it good for everyone involved?
There's some really concerning things, right? Nobody loves me, right? My life is meaningless. I've got a burning hole inside of myself, right? This is it, goodbye. Those are real things that kids are saying with intent and with specific instructions for what they're going to do.
So it's worth capturing that giant volume just to sift through and find like those few needles in the haystack?
I'm a parent. I have 3 daughters. You don't know what's really going on in your kids' heads, right? I see stories all the time about a young person who committed suicide, and the friends and family said, we had no idea he or she was suffering. I don't want any parent to have to go through that.
Alrighty, thank you so much for confirming, sir. Have a great day.
So we're in the...
We'll have some more clips from this in just a moment.
Whatever happened to just growing up and having some independence and
That doesn't
Your
happen.
parents not knowing everything that was going on in your head, and you turned out okay.
No, you don't get to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's too dangerous out there. Right? They have your best interest at heart. They will tell you what's best for you, right? And then you heard Voddie at the top, in loco parentis. Latin term that means in place of a parent, acting in a parental capacity. This is a legal term that came about in 1855. And we'll get to this in just a moment. I want to tell you the background, the history, because this is the legal underpinning of how the public compulsory education system actually can do just about whatever they want with your children when they're in their care. Right? And you can't say anything about it. In fact, the courts say that they can't intervene in between the school and the student relationship any more than they could intervene between the relationship of a father and a son. I'll share that with you. Scary stuff, right? We'll talk about the Prussian education system. We'll look at some of this stuff here in just a bit. We're going to take Voddie Baucham's prompt, and we're going to apply it to what's happening right now with this school surveillance. But let's see. We got another clip for you in just a moment. But before we get there, it's important that we point out what they're actually doing. They're not only monitoring speech that's related to self-harm, they're monitoring everything. They'll tell you, you'll hear here in just a bit, that violations are things like profanity, questionable content, which could be just about anything, right? Harassment, drug use, and then they have a category known as PSS, possible student situation. That is the highest level alert they have. That is when they feel or they've determined that a student poses a threat to themselves or others. So let's look at another clip here. Now, this one is going to be a real-time example of something, a threat coming in. On this one, pay attention to what kind of information they get and that they're privy to. It's a lot. It's photos. It's everything. And then later on, we're going to explain to you how do they go about hiring the people who have access to all of your children's information and just how much can they get, right? And keep in mind, as Summer's going to say later, and we'll just go ahead and put it out there now. This is the precursor to what's coming, right? This is the
how they introduce it to the market.
Yeah, this is Smart City.
The social credit system.
That's how it's going to be. This is a good example of what it's going to be like for the average citizen walking around. So let's check out this clip.
So we've got a student who's sending some screenshots of some text messages. Looks like they're talking about maybe some harassment that's going on, because it sounds like this girl already has a boyfriend and she's
So they're watching that in real time.
their age, maybe? Yeah. This kid is clearly wanting this one particular girl and says they've tried to kill themselves multiple times and failed. The suicide reference as well as the sexual harassment. This is something we might want to make a phone call about and actually PSS. Okay. Hi, Brian. This is Maddie with the Gaggle safety team. We just sent over an email and it did reference suicide, so we wanted to let you know that should be in your inbox right now. Okay, great, and give us a call if any questions come up. All right, well, he said they're going to get all over it, so that is very reassuring to hear.
How did those messages get in the Gaggle system, like if they're texts?
Yeah, so in this case, it looks like the student had uploaded those screenshots or attempted to send them in an email to a couple of people, and it actually looks like these might be staff members. So it sounds like the student was intending to report it or just pass the information along, and so that's how we ended up intercepting those.
Gaggle's working in real time, scanning documents as students write them or emails as kids hit send. When a piece of content triggers the algorithm, it can be quarantined, blocked until reviewers decide it's not a risk.
Let's say the student was trying to send these messages to someone on staff at her school, and this tool has effectively
stopped her from being able to do that. While we do recognize that, we're interrupting this communication, at the same time, we don't want to assume that anybody's going to handle it until we've delivered it into the hands of the folks that we know are set up to receive these situations.
Some alerts require immediate intervention.
I'm going to stop it right there for a minute. I want to make sure that we get commentary over this. Vice can be a little bit naggy about their copyright. This is fair use, right? We're covering this in great detail. So you've heard there, it comes in real time as students hit send. What Gaggle was at first was an email platform that was sold to the school systems, and so that's the business they've been in from the start is information storage and management, and now it has grown out to full digital surveillance. Now, what comes up next here, I think you'll have an opportunity to see an example of what it looks like as it comes in. You'll see there's some pictures in there that are, let's just check it out.
Others seem a little less urgent.
I just said there was also just like a fully uncensored dick on the screen.
Oh yeah, that's very
standard.
normal. Yeah,
that's just a Thursday.
Exactly.
So what is this?
Right. So you heard that, right? We're not going to repeat it, but I'm sure you heard that, right? A fully uncensored, yeah.
Yeah, they just had to add that in. Couldn't help themselves.
Are they not aware that as they're doing the report, that they're talking about minors, right? They're talking about, these are primary and secondary school age children, right? Mm-hmm. All right, fair enough. There are probably some, these are high school kids as well, so there are probably some there that are 18, but look, you're not an adult at 18 here anymore, and that's probably for good reason, but right, is that not just kind of shocking that this is the kind of data that they have access to?
It's kind of like a warning, like, okay, if you put that out there, then somebody's going to be looking at it, and here's a face that's looking at it, so that would obviously make you think a few times before you send stuff out.
Yeah, and that's one of the big points about this kind of surveillance. It does cause the children to alter their behavior, but that's not necessarily a good thing. It could be, right? If the presence of authority causes a young person to behave better, well, that would be a good thing, right? But what's really happening? Let's listen to the rest of this clip here.
A lot of this looks like it's mostly profanity. Oh, okay.
So it's rap lyrics?
Yeah, we see a lot of rap lyrics. Students are writing a lot of songs, raps. A lot of them are really talented, too.
Do you think this kid would be so embarrassed to know that this woman in Chicago is reading his rap lyrics?
It's possible. It's possible. I don't know. I would probably be a little embarrassed, but
I would die.
There's some things that I know that, when I was in school.
Right. She said, I would die. That would get her triggered. She would get flagged on the system for saying that, right? That's how silly the system is.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, how would you feel as they sit there chuckling about, I would die if someone was looking at my information? But no, that's right. It's expected now. Let's see what's the rest of this clip.
If somebody saw it, I would just die. But had there been a service like this, I think I would have benefited from some intervention at times.
Oh, really?
So, it's
so, all right. So,
She's like, oh, really?
Yeah, I would die, right? It would really bother me if someone was, but since I'm working here and we're doing an interview, let me just go ahead and say that, I think I probably would have benefited from this stuff, because it's good for people to be in my head. This is weird. This is our
like
world.
A high production infomercial.
Yeah, that's what this Vice story ended up being. It really was like an infomercial. They did take the Gaggle CEO to task on a few points, but the only objection that Vice had, or really, the secular media has with this kind of service right now is because protected groups, they're saying that this surveillance makes the protected groups in our society.
Don't touch my anointed.
Exactly.
In other words.
Right. Who we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes them, it's dangerous for them, right? Because you don't want someone's sexual preference to be exposed or something. So And that's it. They're not worried about everyone's privacy, right? They're just worried about protected groups being exposed. So I think we got a couple more seconds here.
It's a mixed bag, even as I can really empathize with that embarrassment. I'm also able to see the other side of that too.
So all these red words are triggers. So like
exactly,
a lot of swears.
Yep, exactly. Penis, drug, hurting yourself. Okay, hurting yourself. But that looks like it's in a story.
Gaggle's core technology is its blocked word list, over 1,000 keywords it uses to flag potential dangers. The company says the list is proprietary, but shared a limited selection with Vice, including variations of end my life, cut myself, bully me, and blow up the school. But the list also includes words that aren't inherently dangerous.
When it flags this stuff, like it's flagging gay, is that like...
So we have that flagged for situations where there is harassment that's focused on sexuality, but if students are just talking about, their orientation, we don't care.
What is the reason for...
Well, we don't care, right? We don't care. But after all, we're the authorities. All right, Summer, give us just a little preview of,
right.
We're marketing fear. Is that what's happening? We're really seeing fear being marketed.
Yeah. Well, fear has long been the driving force behind advertising in more ways than the public suspects, of course. Not only do marketers play on our anxieties, both conscious and unconscious, sometimes they also artificially manufacture them, right? And we know that, right, sex and violence, like marrying those two together, like you're having this idea that's constantly told about, this possible activity that's scandalous going on sexually, and then there's this violent element to it. So it's like sex and violence. And then it's playing to the deepest fears of parents, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if there isn't an intervention and things go wrong, if something goes wrong in the building. So playing on that fear is going to be really successful. Like, we do know that from a messaging point of view, like, what we know is that most messaging out in the market tends to have an upbeat, positive feel. So like things that are scary or like guilt-inducing, these are really powerful ways to get people to click or to listen, and people are swayed by that. So it's clear what's going on here. Like, basically they've got a campaign and they've got a message around justifying why they would put this technology in the school.
Right. Fear of death. We'll talk about thanatophobia here in just a little while. The intense and irrational fear of death. Feeling of dread, apprehension, or solicitude when one thinks of the process of dying or ceasing to be. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But thanks for that, Summer.
Well, so for example, like one stat is like the negative ad has a click-through rate that is nearly 70% higher than like from a positive ad.
Oh, so when you... Okay, so now we know why, if you look at your screen there, folks, this is why on their homepage, you're getting a negative vibe. You're getting the... if they were showing happy children, you wouldn't have, and you come to their website, you wouldn't feel any need for safety or security, right?
Right.
So it's, that's what marketing is, right? It's witchcraft.
Yeah. It's playing on people's emotions. And we know that, again, like dialing up fear, dialing up feelings of guilt or sexuality, like these are all things that people are just going to innately respond to. Most of the population will get sucked into that. So,
well, what is Gaggle really seeing? Increases reflect serious incident rates per 10,000 students. We'll look at this on their website here just for a moment, because we're going to be making an argument here. We'll go ahead and tell you what our thesis is, our premise here tonight. The question is, right, if we can make our children safer in school, we certainly want to do that. Right? We're not here to poo-poo anything. We're not here to act like that it's not important that the children are safe. The point is, this is not making anybody safe. And let me show you why. It's not worth, when we think about medicines or drugs that we need to take, you weigh the risks against the benefits. When we talk about vaccines, we always want to we want to weigh the risks against the benefits, the possible risks against the claimed benefits. Same thing with something like modern surveillance technologies in school. Well, let's look. Is it working out? Because this is not new. These companies have been around. They've been doing this for many years now. Mm-hmm. And their argument is, we're here and we're reducing these incidents. Well, I don't know. What do you think? It says here, on the Gaggle website, our 2021-22 annual report details the alarming student behaviors we're seeing, including 26% increase in student safety incidents.
Well, remember, though, they call it problem student situation, so PSS.
Yeah.
And that category is really like, well, what qualifies as that? What goes into that category? That's a really broad range.
And Gaggle is really tight-lipped about their how they classify these things too. We'll talk about that a little bit later about how they hire.
So then that would be really easy to manipulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they also claim that 156,000 plus references to, if you can see your screen there, these words that we better not say here on the platform if we want the video to do anything. 36% increase in incidents involving violence in elementary ages. 56,000 plus incidents that were flagged for questionable behavior and content. You can see there. And here are some graphs. What you see here is from 2020 to 2022, and all of these schools. Well, not all of these schools, but many of the schools. Gaggle's not the only company. Many, probably most of the schools in the country have some form of this going now. Can you see those graphs there, my friends? Does it look like these things are going anywhere but up? Is there any argument to be made for this heightened surveillance actually causing these incidents to go down? They're not going down. They're going up, all of them. Right. So these statistics, if they're truly accurate, they do not suggest a world that needs more surveillance. It suggests a world that has become disenchanted. Now, we've been talking about that with you in the last show. We introduced you to that term that we're going to be using in a philosophical sense. We're talking about our society and how it the overall social imaginary, or the meta-narrative, which is just the idea of what have the greatest number of people in our society, what have they accepted as true, as their worldview? What have they come to tolerate? And the Bible is offensive. For one, you can't have Jesus Christ is not the only way, right? Things like that. Disenchanted. In other words, the supernatural is not relevant anymore. So disenchantment was an expression coined by Max Weber. It was coined to describe a process whereby the world has been rid of all spiritual reality and subjected to the power of the calculating and rational human mind. There's something called logical positivism. That was a philosophical position that cropped up many years ago, and it didn't last very long because it couldn't stand. It couldn't apply its own logic to itself because it found itself to be false. But logical positivism was a philosophical position that said anything supernatural is not worth discussing. It's useless. So in that sense, only the hard data. That's where truth lies. That's where all truth lies. That's kind of what we see here. It's kind of come back. It's kind of made a comeback. So an enchanted universe is one in which the space in which we live in, there's a presence of spiritual agency where things are subjects, not objects, right? Children are subjects. They're not objects. They're not numbers. They're people. And an enchanted space or environment is one in which there is an epistemology of engagement, not disengagement. Disenchantment involves, among other things, the emptying out of space, the objectification of being, and the linearizing of time. Now, Christian theology from the 17th century became associated with a disenchanted, modernizing agenda through early Christian scientists such as Bacon, Newton, and Descartes. But while modernity has brought unprecedented levels of supremacy over nature, the association of Christian theology with the modern agenda of disenchantment has been questioned in this postmodern context. Probably now we would say we're beyond postmodern. We're into the, metamodern, some are calling it. But theologies of place and space are now being sought that take seriously an agenda that places God and spirituality back in the world and not beyond the world. That emphasizes an organic and not a mechanistic universe. And that resuscitates the notion of agency. That piece is from, let me give the credit on that one. That is I don't have the credit with me. That was last night. I just brought it in again so we could hear that again. I want to always give the credit on it. I'll put that in the notes below. But disenchantment in the West is it's both a symptom and it's also used as a weapon, right? So they're taking advantage of the fact that we have, that our culture, our society has decided that the church is not relevant. It's not important anymore.
Yeah, it's like we're also just everybody's expecting the worst too,
Yeah,
everyone expects the worst.
Yeah,
so we've got to brace for the worst, and we've got to look for the worst, and we've got to try to prevent the worst from happening.
Yeah, and Gaggle, these companies are super successful so far. They're making a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of overhead, really. I guess all of their overhead is spent in the technology, in perfecting the technology, because they don't have to have, right, all of the people that work for these companies, not all, but most, the people who are actually looking at the data are just remote people. You can get a job there. $10 an hour. Right? That's what it's worth to them to give access to your kids' personal data.
Yeah.
But this is, it's like Summer was saying there with the marketing of fear. Disenchantment in the West is a symptom of where we've come from. It's also used as a weapon, the logical progression of the Enlightenment.
But we do want to point out that what we see here is we're witnessing the social credit system rolling in, and this is just the way that this is one of the ways that they're justifying it and getting people used to it, and we'll look at how it's changing people's behavior, how people interact with one another. So it's like you have to swim inside of yourself to survive, in a sense, like not interact like a real person because you don't want to be tagged for something that you're saying. And that's a form of control, right? I mean, that's going to obviously alter behavior because you don't want the bad luck of getting flagged.
You have to swim inside yourself?
Yes. Like, I know that well, it's funny. Obviously, that story is from when I was
Summer's a mystic.
Well, it's it comes from when I was living in Bali, and I was having a conversation with a Balinese Hindu priest a few years ago, and he told me that they had opened up the ancient book, and that we were coming upon a time where, in order to survive, people would have to stay silent because what you said would get you killed. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. Yes. Obviously, I'm not saying that we should be listening to that as some sort of prophecy or whatnot, but I just found that really interesting.
Yeah, that what's to me what stands out about that to me is that everyone, Ecclesiastes 3, God has set eternity in everyone's heart. Everyone knows that the one true living creator God exists.
Exactly.
We just all suppress that knowledge to one degree or another, as Romans chapter 1 says. So it's not, what Summer's pointing out there is evidence of the image of God in people.
Yeah.
We're all image bearers.
Yeah.
And even though as we suppress the truth and unrighteousness, then we express what comes out of us, it comes out wonky and a little squirrely sometimes. But you can see there, that's an example of the image of God in false religion.
Yeah, exactly. And, did you want to bring up the NASSP survey at all?
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. Okay.
Yeah, at the end of this first segment, we'll get into those pieces. All right. Well, but what that brings to mind, it's like a flattening out what we see today in the West. Anyway, we're really talking about the West, talking about Canada, the United States, and other nations who you would consider the West, the UK. It's this disenchantment. It's a flattening out of reality into a spiritless dimension where man crowns himself as a supreme authority. That's the logical progression of the Enlightenment. And at the same time, this disenchantment is weaponized through governance and new laws meant to punish anyone who claims Christ to be sovereign, king, and supreme authority over everything. And where that shows up here is, as you heard Voddie Baucham at the top of the show, describing how we've just forgotten what's important. We've just handed our children over to the state. And now it's normal. Now if you homeschool, maybe not today, and when Voddie did that several years ago, opinions were a little different. After the past 2 or 3 years now, there's a lot more people who are homeschooling, but in general, people ask questions. They wonder, how can you homeschool? How do you get away with it? Like it's some kind of illegal thing to do. Anyway, Gaggle is a company that monitors the work and the conversations and the text messages and the photos of over 5 million children in the United States. And schools pay a lot of money for it. Now, research into the publicly available documentation through freedom of information requests and stuff like that because we're talking about public education here. You can't hide documentation. You're not supposed to be able to hide documentation. So through some of those documents that are available to see, it reveals a fast-growing industry in the United States of essential data gathering companies using the latest in machine learning, artificial intelligence, digital surveillance, video surveillance, facial recognition, of course, and hundreds of thousands of virtually unknown persons who work from home curating and gathering this personal information for companies, or in this case, they're sifting through the personal and private information of primary and secondary school-age children, including their photos, personal conversation, all in the name of safety. So what we see is a massive and growing surveillance and data gathering industrial complex, the surveillance industrial complex, which is just a subset of the military industrial complex. This one is aimed directly at our children, who are in almost all cases unable to opt out of these services. Or as most everyone else in the world, we're passively opting into technologies that we don't really understand and don't have a grasp of the consequences. The school counselor very soon is going to be an AI, perhaps. And in a meta-modern culture where, once again, logical positivism has made a comeback, these technologies are going to quickly become the gods of the new age. Now, over at tutorialspoint.com, it's the website where you can go to find out what is this thing, what is that thing. They have a page here on Gaggle. They say Gaggle is an AI-powered school monitoring software that analyzes kids' Google and Microsoft accounts and has near universal access to their data. Any device that connects to a school device, like if you have a school laptop and your cousin who lives in a different state comes over and plugs his phone in to charge, Gaggle's going to get that data. So any device that connects to a school device or any device that connects to the school network, it's fair game. So look, when you go pick up your kids at school, go airplane mode. But Gaggle's main goal is to notify school officials as soon as possible if there's a threat, which is loosely defined, of course. Any threat to children's physical or mental health, as well as to safeguard them from hazardous information. Ultimate purpose, though, is to prevent catastrophic occurrences from happening. Now, as I said, they have under surveillance, this is one company, more than 5 million students in the U.S. And when a keyword of concern comes through their system and gets flagged, it instantly tells school administrators. For example, it indicates evidence of illicit behavior, strong language, right? Language, potential cyberbullying, or mentions of self-harm. Gaggle monitors and flags communications and material that they say signals a school safety risk. And they have an in-house team of certified safety specialists. Now, they use that term, certified safety specialists. There is no certification system for these people. That's just a term they use. And Gaggle doesn't, whatever their certification system is, they're not willing to share it with those who have asked so far. So talk more about that in a bit, but they're not really willing to tell you how they train their folks, if they train them. The team notifies district employees when anything happens or anything that's been tagged and flagged, and the system notifies them of any rules breaches, offensive content, or serious mental health concerns. And mental health is one of the big points that you see talked about. And that's one of the main, of course, as we've already mentioned so far, words we can't say here. But it'll also keep the system informed about anything that could possibly pose a threat. Now, it also catches, I'm not sure how this works, but it also catches obscene photos. So for that to work, it would have to be, human beings. Someone's eyes have to be on it, I would imagine. And any messages that have weapons mentioned and things like that. And we'll show you later that these things still get into the school at the same rate, at a higher rate, actually. Now, members who monitor these areas, according to Gaggle, have backgrounds in specialized fields like law enforcement, psychology, social work, crisis management, things like that. And this group assesses reported information and categorizes the online occurrences to determine the severity of a situation. Now, while it has the ability to prevent catastrophes through this content analysis, of course, it also adds a never-before-seen level of school surveillance and privacy issues. For example, delicate topics like mental health, personal relationships, sexual preference, right, with no real safeguards on keeping that information private other than, according to Gaggle, other than the good word of thousands of remote employees that the company never meets in person. I think we've got a clip from the CEO here in a bit who says just that. Right? It's just, they have to sign their name to a document saying that they won't misuse nude pictures, for example. Should we trust that? And school systems are paying millions in taxpayer dollars to get access to this information. So the Gaggle Corporation claims that its personnel have degrees in certain subjects. However, they're not really open about their business model or the credentials of their employees. That's a big problem for a surveillance company who's spying on the nation's school children. Don't you think that they're not transparent on how they hire, who they hire? Why do they call these people certified? How did they get certified? So very little is known about Gaggle's training and certification programs, and that's because this industry is largely unregulated. Nobody really knows who has access to your children's photos and conversations. Also, a big problem is that Gaggle's job postings for personnel don't require any prior expertise in education, law enforcement, mental health, or young adult therapy. Only that they must be familiar with social media vernacular. That's it. If you know how to get on Twitter and mix it up, if you know how to cause a dumpster fire, you can work here.
Well, also, how about guaranteeing me as a parent that somebody isn't a child sex offender?
Yeah, we don't have any. Gaggle is really not forthcoming with how they screen their employees at all. Clearly, there's a major issue here.
Or the EMF.
Yeah, well, the fact that they're adding, because look, there's no question about it. 5G is going to play a major role in this. Already is in some of the model cities who have received 5G communications. You've probably heard all the rumors about that, and this is going to make it even worse, right? Our children are going to show up at school and be swimming, saturated in a soup of electromagnetic frequencies. Did you have some data on?
Well, no. I mean, just to back up the fact that if you do a quick Google search and you've got the Department of Education doing a study and saying exposure to these frequencies cause harm to the nervous system and the reproductive system and give you higher risk of cancer. And there's all these tips that they want to offer up about how to control how much your child is getting exposed and, turning off your airplane mode, putting your devices on airplane mode so that signals aren't constantly coming in. And so all these tips and tricks, right, on how to responsibly, keep your body from getting that hit. But yeah, you can't escape it if you're walled in and these cameras and these frequencies are just constantly cooking you. So that's a whole nother can of issues.
Yeah. Well, you see here on the the Gaggle website, where you go to apply, right here where they have the job openings, come and help us save lives. Now that's the claim, right? That's always
Isn't that
the
always the hook?
That's it. That's always the hook. Now, while Gaggle claims to have prevented hundreds of, tragedies, and they say they identified 722 attempts at this, it's truly impossible to determine to what degree Gaggle has affected or had any real impact on such prevention. The extreme level of surveillance is unjustified and obviously not good for students or teachers in many, many ways. Parents and students have also complained about, of course, the way business is done today in the information age, third-party surveillance. Right Gaggle is a company that uses third-party software, right, to achieve their surveillance. So there's many other parties involved here. So kids are opting into these things, which is interesting. I'll cover that in just a second, why that's a big problem, the opting in and not being able to opt out, because there is no alternative. There's just no other system. I'll get to that in a second. But like most other platforms, Gaggle is vulnerable to data leaks. Sensitive information just can easily end up being released to the public. Something that could cause more self-harm, right? Not prevent it. So far, what we've learned about these surveillance companies is that while their claim is to be preventing, causing less of these things to happen, the truth is they create a context where more of these things should be happening. And actually, on Gaggle's own website, it appears that that is the case, as these, according to their own tracking of the incidents, they're just getting to be more and more. And given the high volume of data breaches that occur every day throughout the world, as leaky as this one is, this is bad news. Now, in an article from BuzzFeed News, do I have that up here? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there you go. I got the big eyeball for you. Big Brother's watching you. BuzzFeed asked Gaggle, to a list of specific questions about how they train their employees, or what are their qualifications, what do they require. Gaggle didn't answer. It also didn't specify how much content or how much content safety representatives are required to review each day and each month. But Gaggle wrote on its company wiki in 2017 that moderators individually reviewed over 1 million blocked student communications each month. Over 1 million. According to two job descriptions on the website, level 1 safety representatives, for example, are positions that are filled by contract employees that are paid about $10 an hour. These safety representatives do not need experience in counseling or anything else, really. They don't need to have experience working with children or teens or young adults. As I said earlier, all they're required to know is to be familiar with current slang and social media. A job description posted to Indeed notes that they are typically capped at 38 hours a week. So, always keeping it under the full time. And it says they're legally entitled to benefits, but they decline to answer whether or not they actually provide benefits for their employees. Ultimately, what Gaggle is there to do is to make money. And of course, not just to make money. This is what Summer and I, we talk about this all the time. I tend to think they're there to make money, and they are, and they do. But
well, yeah, it's the normalization of the control grid that is rolling out.
And that's true. That's true too.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're a good team. We look at these things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
She's got how do you say it? Got one eye one eye open.
One eye open.
Or one eyebrow up all the time looking at these
like,
people.
What's the angle? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of more like the glass is half full, and I'm a little bit more like, well, the glass is half empty, maybe, or like a little bit more suspicious. You're a little bit more like forgiving, so we're good. Good match.
Well, Gaggle, goodness.
I know, you keep doing that.
Gaggle also declined to detail its safety representative hiring process and any training programs they may have. But job reviews that are posted to Glassdoor suggest that they're not particularly rigorous. One person claimed that an online application added to a waiting list, and shortly after they received a job offer and emails explaining how everything works. Gaggle analyzes student data, and they funnel this information to what's called a safety management dashboard. All right.
Well, and you know that they're collecting it to, of course, then be more clever about how they can control behavior. So it's like, okay, what's Generation Alpha doing, and what makes them tick? What are they into? What are they not into? And then how can we manipulate that to get what we want?
Wow, you know what I did? I didn't get the. We went to all that trouble to get these. So you could see what the safety management dashboard looks like. I'll pull it up here. I just forgot to pull them up into our show tonight. But all the information goes to something called the safety management dashboard. Where is it? There it is. That's what the employees look at. That's what they get. I don't know what all this means. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. This is the safety management dashboard. School administrators have access to it so they can see the rules violations alongside, of course, a numeric ID of the students who committed them. Gaggle operates by a 3-strike rule, meaning that mild rule violations could be flagged to school administrators if a student does it repeatedly. According to Gaggle, students who commit 3 strikes have their account privileges limited. Now, this is where it gets a little sinister. Follow this with me. So if a student, for whatever reason, has their privileges to the technology at the school limited or suspended, they can't do their schoolwork. They can't communicate with their teachers. Right? That access is necessary for communicating with teachers and completing assignments because Gaggle controls that too. In fact, that's what Gaggle, that's what kind of business they were when they started. They were one of these, I don't know if anyone who's been in a community college or a university class in the past 10, 15 years or 20, probably about 20 years now. You've got these portals that you go into, is where all your classwork is, and the instructors and professors can communicate with you through that portal. That's what it's like for the kids in the primary and secondary schools now. And if they, for whatever reason, are disciplined, locked out of the services, they can't do their assignments. Sarah Roberts, a UCLA professor and scholar in digital content moderation, said people ought to be skeptical about anybody using a 3 strikes policy. It doesn't work. It's not an effective technique, as she says. Critics worry also that schools are teaching students to accept sweeping forms of surveillance, and that's really what we're focused on, what this is training our kids to do. Roberts said, "My sense about this particular suite of products and services is that it's a solution in search of a problem." Right. Which is to say that the only way that the logic of it works is if we first accept that our children ought to be captured within a digital system, basically from the time they're a fetus until further notice. So Gaggle claims that its tool promotes a sense of digital citizenship. But documents that BuzzFeed was able to get a hold of indicate that students often don't even understand that their work and communications are being surveilled until after they've violated the rules. So they're not really upfront with it. Chris Gilliard, an English professor at Macomb Community College, said, "Teaching young people that you should exist online to the extent that you're palatable to companies or future employers, I think is worrisome," unquote. I would think it's worse than that, but we agree nonetheless. So here's a question for you. How, if what they're actually, they say they exist to do is to improve the mental health of these students, well, how mentally healthy can a person be who is constantly aware that even their thoughts are being eyeballed? By thoughts, I mean, when you're talking to your friends or just taking notes, right? They get all of their documents, right? So might be writing a poem, be making diary entries. You shouldn't do that on the internet, of course. But anyway, I'm sure some do. But how mentally healthy could you be? How safe could you feel? Knowing that you're constantly under surveillance. And that some unknown individual somewhere in the world is looking at your data, looking at your photos. And how mentally healthy can you be if you're always aware that at any moment, because you see it happening around you to other people, at any moment you could get plucked out, called on the carpet, and subjected to serious consequences just for being immature, which is what kids are. Gaggle told BuzzFeed that it recommends school districts get permission from parents and students before they use the company's tools. Now here, this is where it really gets severe. They say that, right? It's lip service. That's just lip service. They say they recommend that school districts get permission from parents and students before they use the company's tools to monitor them. So, how kind of them. They provide a choice for students to opt out. Big problem. They have a monopoly. There are no other alternatives. Right? There's no other platform to use to complete your work and communicate with your teachers. That's not a choice. That is training the kids to accept totalitarianism. So we have another clip to share with you here. We'll talk about that Panopticon in just a moment. Let's see. This next clip. How does Gaggle ensure that their content moderators do not misuse pics and info? Maybe we should play this. Let's play this clip here. These two guys here. Here's two young guys who got this happened to them. They got called on the carpet. They didn't realize that they were breaking the rules.
Because it's a bad word in and of itself, is just targeting the gay community.
Charlie Schmidt and Leo Holcomb were freshmen in Minneapolis when their high school started using Gaggle. That spring, they say they were flagged.
It was during the COVID year where we were all online. So it was basically the equivalent of like whispering in class.
It was like passing notes.
Yeah.
Do you remember getting flagged? Like what happened? How did you get notified?
I think I said, like, if we have to take another test, it'll be the death of me.
And they brought you to the administration for that?
And I remember they called my parents. My parents were like, what's going on? I had no idea what was going on. And then I went into the vice principal's. I just walked in blindly, and they showed me the sheet in the manila folder of all this stuff I had said. I was like, where did you get that? They told me that they were monitoring it.
I made a joke, I think towards Leo, I don't remember what in context, that just said like gays and bays. And it's funny because they rhyme, but I just remember like that was highlighted, and I was kind of like, why is that highlighted? And then there were like a bunch of swear words too. I'm sitting there like, well, like I'm 14, like saying fuck is like part of my personality. Like, what do you want?
It's every 3 words.
How did you feel when you saw the word gay highlighted on your alert sheet?
That's your public education system, right? It's just every 3 words, and that's cool.
There's a lot of people that are gay, and I'm gay, and that,
I am also.
yeah, and that like get that word flagged because they use it because like they are, and like it's part of their vocabulary because that's just like how it works. And some people use it in an offensive way, so that's why it can get flagged sometimes. But then I look back on it and I was like, I only know 2 people that got called into the vice principal's office, and it's Leo and me, and
there were a lot more people saying the same stuff we were saying.
Yeah, and it's just I always thought it was like ironic looking back that like the only kids that I know of that were ever called in were both gay kids.
Did they?
Okay, so that's one of the claims as well that you hear quite a bit, is that it's not uniform. There are certain groups that will be singled out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's one of the downsides that they highlight, is that there's going to be this targeting of this community.
One of the big problems with this whole thing is that one of the complaints is that it can be used for discipline. It's not supposed to be used in that way. We'll get to that in just a minute, where there's some more details on that. But what's scary about it is, it's well, that's right. I didn't get to the clip I wanted to play. How do they make sure that content moderators don't misuse the content? So let's see. We've got a little clip here. Here you go.
Students.
How do you keep kids' information safe, given that there's a lot of people with access to minors' information and potentially, inappropriate photos or things that are very personal?
There's no personal identifiable information. They're just seeing that small snippet saying good or bad.
What if it's like a naked photo of a teenager?
Unfortunately, there's no way to basically not show that picture, but also make that determination.
So how do you make sure that person's privacy isn't violated then? Like that piece of content doesn't go beyond the Gaggle universe?
So we do have policies that we make all of our reviewer contractors sign, that they will not share or download any of the information. We disable downloading in the interface as well, but that doesn't mean that someone couldn't take a screenshot, just like with Snapchat, what people do. There's always going to be ways to get around any system, right? And
so how does that make you feel, right? That the comfort you have is somebody's word, somebody's signature on a document, that they're not going to misuse your kid's photos. So what kind of assurance is that today, right? So it's honor system. It's just simply the honor system, which, contradictions all over the place. Right? You don't trust students and parents, but you do trust thousands of unknown private contractors with kids' data and pictures. Right?
It's creepy.
It is creepy. Oh yeah, there's examples too. One of the big problems here too is that it makes it way more likely for teenagers, for kids, to to get involved with law enforcement. I forget how they said it. It greases the skids. It increases the the chances that kids are going to make contact with the police because they get involved with this. Here's a clip.
Which would obviously be pretty traumatizing.
Yeah, for sure.
Because Gaggle flagged that he wrote how to shoot up a building, but discovered he meant how to shoot up a building with a cam for a photography project. Or when an officer was contacted over a report of child pornography, but found the images that triggered the alert were actually of the student's older adult sister, who had plugged her phone into the student's computer and didn't realize it automatically uploaded her photos. Another student was suspended.
There you go. All right, that's what I was talking about earlier. Check this out. All she had to do, she plugged her phone into his school laptop, and Gaggle downloaded all of her data.
Her phone into the student's computer and didn't realize it automatically uploaded her photos. Another student was
automatically uploaded her photos. So this is the world that this is what they want smart cities to be like.
Yeah, and an episode like this too is like, it's just to let you know that, hey, we're watching.
Yeah, well, it's predictive programming in a sense, right?
Suspended and referred to juvenile court after a Gaggle alert flagged images of child pornography on his school-issued Chromebook. When police interviewed the student, they found he'd plugged his personal phone into the laptop, which had synced to the nude selfies his girlfriend had sent him. In several of these police reports, which Vice News obtained via Freedom of Information Act requests, officers...
By the way, what just slipped by there that no one mentioned was a nude minor. Am I right? That's what we have here. Just, hey, by the way, does anybody care about that? I mean, the first problem is, why do these kids send naked photos all over the place? This is a different age, right? This is a different time. It's weird out there. But I guess it's apparently normal for that kind of thing to happen. We have to be really careful with this topic here on YouTube because Vice has already sold us out quite a few times.
Well, the way that they end this episode too is all about, they give you like the somber suicide hotline and they're like, if it can save one life. But meanwhile, up in Canada, they're getting ready to work on some legislation about mature minors and how they want to give them access to assisted suicide. So how is that for strange, right? Over here on this side, we've got these people saying that we need to lock down our kids in school to prevent that kind of tragedy. While up in Canada right now, coming soon to the USA, there's a new, what is that new term? Mature minors. Mature minors.
Mature minors. That is a new,
like 12 and up.
Yeah, there's no way that now this is Summer mentioned this yesterday. It's a really good point, right? With the Respect for Marriage Act, the relation to this, what the Respect for Marriage Act did was it removed any definition that was in the legal system for marriage, which said man and a woman, and it also defined spouse as a
man
or a woman. A spouse is a man or a woman. It said, now it repealed all that and changed the definition to individual. Now that doesn't have any. Man and woman has an expectation of an age of maturity. And now here's another one of those examples from Canada.
Yeah, mature minors, and also they're what's up on the table too is about people that are just not mentally sound. So we're looking at people that might be depressed. They could, the way it was described to me too is like when we were looking at a report about it was that if you want to get, for example, a knee surgery, you might have to wait 6 months to do that, but on the same day you could order up suicide.
Why is that, you think? Why do you think that they no wait suicide? Oh, here we go again with the words.
They do, and they admit that it saves money for the country.
Oh, okay. So it's all right. So it's
so they don't get tied down in the medical bills of people.
It's economical if we make this available.
Yeah. So it's just the juxtaposition, like the contrast of if we just save one life, we're going to sacrifice all of our freedom and privacy to just save one life. But then meanwhile, we're getting ready to pull forth legislation about mature minors and how they can be, they don't need parental consent necessarily. They can be candidates for wanting to end their life. And it's shocking.
Yeah, it's just strange. It's just strange stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you might be thinking out there, how is all this legal? Well, we've shown you about in loco parentis. We'll talk about that again in just a moment. I'll give you the history of that. But there are, when we're talking about student surveillance and the U.S. Constitution, there are two constitutional rights that are in play with regard to this kind of surveillance. It's under the First Amendment, it's free speech. And in the Fourth Amendment, it's freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, which would be access to your information, your private information on your phone. But generally, schools have not been found by courts to have violated rights to free speech when they surveil student speech on the school intranet or on a school-owned device. That would seem reasonable. And the Supreme Court has also held that student speech may be limited if it is determined to be materially disruptive to classwork or involves some kind of substantial disorder or invasion of the rights of others, which is a judgment call. But nonetheless, still sounds reasonable. The Supreme Court also held that school officials do not need a warrant or probable cause to search students in school. That one's always been a little strange to me, but courts have also generally upheld that when cameras are placed in public locations, where you wouldn't normally have a reasonable expectation of privacy, that the school wouldn't be held accountable for that, and that these things do not violate the Fourth Amendment, in other words, and that classrooms are considered to be public places. However, a school restroom or locker room would not be. That's where the line would be drawn. But how is the informed consent acquired? That was one of the questions that came to my mind first when we were watching this. Is do the kids know that they're opted into this? Right. Well, we have an expectation in our society that if we're going to be signed up for something or registered for something or become or someone's going to have access to us or our information somehow, that we have to be told that. That is the law. Informed consent. Right? They can't just do it without telling us. Well, since most schools notify students through device policies, third-party software as well, about their network access policies, since most schools notify the students that they really have no right to privacy while on the school network or while using a school-owned device, once again, it's likely that there's no Fourth Amendment violation here. But the point about the informed consent is they don't know they've opted in most of the time.
Yeah, well, what they'll also do too is they'll put out these opinion pieces and they'll put out articles. Of course, like there's one from Politico, and it's talking about Americans broadly support having armed police, metal detectors, and student mental health screenings going on, and that public school parents were more likely to support the presence of armed officers.
That's
schools.
The next, yeah.
So yeah, you're sort of getting this message like, well, everybody else is okay with it, and there's an urgency, and we need this, so.
And that's the next step. They're already in some districts training school personnel to be armed. Now, so think about what we have here. The Panopticon. Think about this now. In a high school, or a middle school for that matter, you'll have full, total surveillance, video, digital, real-time surveillance, and they're armed. The personnel there are armed. Could that be any more like a prison? We'll talk about this Panopticon in just a minute. I'm excited to get to that one. But, just to finish up the point on rights to privacy, it's not likely that the Fourth Amendment, that the school would ever be held accountable for violating any of these rights because, once again, of this in loco parentis. They are the parents of the children when they're in their care. One of the big problems with this, as we said earlier, was that this information has been used for disciplinary purposes, for singling out certain demographics, and so then you see the problem with this increased contact with law enforcement, streamlining the school to prison pipeline, and that is also a huge business in this country. It's a big problem. The way that prisons are profiting off of nonviolent crimes, for example, and this makes that much more likely too. Long-term effects on the students. Students they come to expect extreme surveillance wherever they go. They're being desensitized to technocracy. They're being desensitized to the scientific management of behavior. And as we talked about yesterday, a big problem we have now is apathy and pride, but in this case, it's more apathy and isolation. This promotes apathy and isolation in our kids. And that's not a good thing. So far, what we find out from all this is that this is not any kind of healthy option. It's not a good idea. And it gets even worse. So how does the globalist oneness ideology play into this education model? Now, on this channel, way back when it started, the old Grad from Carolina channel, back in the day, and there's just, if you go way back and scroll down, you'll see these videos where I was describing for you Robert Mueller, Alice Bailey, how they were involved in getting this education system that we see today going. And that is through the United Nations. So where have these ideas really come from? Well, let's talk about UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It's a 193, they have 193 member states signed on. They have 53 field offices and 199 national commissions that facilitate their global mandate. And they also partner with non-governmental organizations and intergovernmental organizations, and also major private corporations. Their founding mission is to advance peace, sustainable development, and human rights by facilitating collaboration and dialogue among nations. So the SDGs, that's really what they're about. But there was an organization, there was an attempt to create an organization, a very Orwellian one, you see on the screen there. At one point during UNESCO's history, this Orwellian New World Information Order, the NWIO, proposed to license and control all journalists, broadcasters, and media personnel worldwide. The NWIO was intended to control dissemination of all news and information. It would have been put in place globally. The kind of totalitarian controls over information that was seen operational in the Soviet Union, Communist China, and every other communist regime. But it's no surprise UNESCO advocates calling for world revolution, and that they participate in agitation, agitprop, agitation and propaganda, to shape the public mind, both young and old. So they were definitely involved. You can see this is how we can tie the media to the United Nations. It's through UNESCO, but also the education system. UNESCO essentially exists to act as the mind control unit for the Orwellian Global Party. Now, New American magazine reported in May 2003, key among UNESCO forefathers were names like Alger Hiss, Harry Dexter White, who had a direct hand in appointing, there's a Huxley under every rock, Julian Huxley as the first general director or director general of UNESCO. So, Julian Huxley, Fabian socialist, you know who we're talking about, right? So Huxley greatly influenced the direction of UNESCO. He wrote in the 1948 book, UNESCO, Its Purpose and Philosophy, quote, "The world today is in the process of becoming one, and UNESCO must help in the speedy and satisfactory realization of this process." Huxley defined UNESCO's governing philosophy as, quote, "a scientific world humanism, global in extent and evolutionary in background. Political unification in world government will be necessary for the next stage in human evolutionary progress." Huxley declared UNESCO would assist in the process of values clarification on a global level, right? So that's the new morality. He goes on to say it right here, quote, "It will be one of the major tasks of the philosophy division of UNESCO to stimulate a restatement of morality that shall be in harmony with modern knowledge and adapted to the fresh functions imposed on ethics by the world of today." Well, you might be asking, what does this have to do with our show tonight? Well, this Huxleyan vision of a new morality gained some momentum during the 1990s with the help of radical theologian Hans Kung and former Soviet director Mikhail Gorbachev. So the vision is being realized through UNESCO of the, quote, declaration of a global ethic through the Earth Charter. So here we can see how Agenda 21, which is what it is, right? It's what it's called, right? That name, they've moved away from that name because I think people got caught onto it really fast. Agenda 2030 now, whatever, Green New Deal, doesn't matter. It's Agenda 21. But through the Earth Charter and a mushrooming assortment of United Nations related education initiatives. So the UNESCO programs and curricula are leading the way for the world's children to accept and to start campaigning for themselves global government, right? That's what Gaggle plays a big role in, creating this digital citizenship, this idea of a collective. And here's where the rubber meets the road. A 10-part series was prepared for teachers, published in 1949 under the title Toward World Understanding. It asserted that one of the chief aims of education today should be to prepare boys and girls to take an active part in the creation of a world society. They said we must stamp out love of country. We must stamp out the family. The family must be viewed as the enemy. They say as long as the child breathes the poisoned air of nationalism, education, and world-mindedness can produce only rather precarious results. As we have pointed out, it is frequently the family that infects the child with these ideas of nationalism. The school should therefore use the means described earlier to combat family attitudes. How about that? That's the good old United Nations. Consequently, in the intervening decades, leadership at the United Nations and UNESCO has learned to be more subtle in their language, or simply to lie and deny about their purpose, to bring about world government on totalitarian principles, which is exactly what they're training into our kids right now, and this This student surveillance, digital surveillance, is just another part of that. Instead of world government today, they've backed their language down now. UNESCO today speaks of global governance. That sounds much kinder, doesn't it? They talk about global sustainability, global initiatives, and collective world action. They talk about international law, global norms, and ethics. Well, they want to get rid of the family, right? They don't want parents involved in this process. Well, in loco parentis. That brings us around to this. Are public schools legally seen as the parents? Is that even possible? Well, this Latin term, in loco parentis, means in place of a parent or instead of a parent. This refers to situations in which someone other than a biological parent takes on the role of a parent to a minor child without formally adopting the child. The situation applies to legal guardians, step-parents, grandparents, and other situations. These sound reasonable, right? A grandparent. You might see that that would be reasonable. Cases in which an individual has taken on parental duties. In the early 19th century, in England, life expectancy was short. It was poor. And parents worried what would happen to their children if they should die. In 1855, the Cheadle School, originally named the Manchester Warehouseman and Clerks Orphan School, so this is an orphanage, was established to take care of children who had lost their fathers. Because fathers had sole responsibility for and control of their children, these children were considered to be orphans, even if the mother was living. The school adopted the motto in loco parentis, in place of the parent, to describe its dedication to caring for and educating the children in their custody. So the term in loco parentis became a legal precedent applied to wards of the court, wards of the state, which gave them legal standing in the educational field. So this concept was adopted in the United States, where primary and secondary schools, the ones we're talking about today, as well as colleges and universities at first, were permitted to act in loco parentis for their students in place of the parent. As a result, schools were given broad discretionary power and authority in restricting and disciplining students. Now, this is really interesting. One court, United States court, stated in 1866, quote, "We have no more authority to interfere with the educator-child relationship. We have no more authority to interfere with that relationship than we have to control the domestic discipline of a father and his family." So this allowed schools to take, to place restrictions. They had broad latitude to place restrictions on students' behavior, both in school and out of school. It allowed the schools to punish students in place of the parents. Such restrictions included, for example, the expulsion of female students who were considered morally undesirable. Colleges and universities also sought to restrict students' right to free speech, forbidding student organizations from demonstrating on campus, for example. In the 1960s and 70s, this in loco parentis finally met some public opposition, especially where it applied to imposing the will of the state on adult students. And then following a number of landmark rulings by the Supreme Court, the application of in loco parentis disappeared from institutions of higher education. However, remember, this had to do with the state or these institutions imposing their will over adult students. However, this principle is still very much, firmly, and very quietly still in place in primary and secondary schools in the United States. Our children are wards of the state by birth certificate and by our cooperation with the state in the process. Voddie Baucham talks about this too. I encourage you to look up everything he says about homeschooling and this relationship that the state tries to impose on our kids. So some examples of an in loco parentis relationship would be a grandparent who has an ongoing responsibility for raising a grandchild, if parents die. An aunt or uncle who takes on the responsibility of caring for a child after the death of his parents. It may take leave if the child has a serious health condition. A same-sex partner who will co-parent a biological child may take leave for the child's birth and or bonding with the child. This is how the FMLA laws would work, is specifically what I'm reading from here. That's why it's saying take leave. And the public primary and secondary schools where parents are today often purposely deceived by educators to push certain agendas, to offer certain chemicals and drugs, and to take them to certain events, drag shows. Have you ever wondered why? How can they get away with that? How are they actually able to do this, to offer kids these medications, these drugs? How are they allowed to keep the parents out of a decision-making process? It's because they have the legal standing to do it, because we allow them. Regarding the surveillance issue, educational studies scholar John Ambrosio says, this is a manifestation of the neoliberal project of cultural reconstruction and moral reform. In a series titled Evil Infrastructures on the Society for Cultural Anthropology website, Ambrosio is quoted as saying, for many scholars, the cost of surveillance in public schools is self-evident. The most popular theories of surveillance are based on the concept of the Panopticon, which is an all-seeing enclosure in which institutional power overrides individual agency. So the word Panopticon derives from the Greek panoptes, which literally means all-seeing. The Panopticon is a type of institutional building which has a system of control that's was designed by English philosopher, social theorist Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century, known by its proponents as the perfect prison. The concept of the design is to allow all the prisoners of an institution to be observed by a single security guard, one eye, right? Without the inmates being able to tell whether or not they're being watched. Does this sound familiar? Today, the concept is being used as a blueprint for a surveillance society in which our every move is being tracked and recorded. Ultimately, the goal is this, that in the end, the prisoners will police themselves. That's what they're training our kids to do. So although it is physically impossible for a single guard to observe all the inmates at once, the fact that the inmates cannot know when they're being watched means that they are motivated to act as though they are being watched at all times. Thus, the inmates are effectively compelled to regulate their own behavior. As you can see there, the architecture of the Panopticon consists of a rotunda with an inspection house at the center. The manager or staff of the institution are able to watch the inmates. Bentham conceived the basic plan as being equally applicable to hospitals, sanatoriums, asylums, and yes, of course, schools. But he devoted most of his efforts to developing a design for a Panopticon prison. It is his prison that is now most widely meant by the term Panopticon. So instead of the prison guard, the one prison guard in the middle, now this is achieved through digital surveillance. Steve Mollenkopf, who gave the Qualcomm keynote address at the Consumer Electronics Show in 2017, said this, quote, 5G will upgrade the human experience. Right? We can't wait. We'll upgrade the human experience at home and across industries as we connect virtually everything. So this is in 2017. He said, by 2020, analysts estimate that there will be more than 20 billion installed IoT devices around the world, generating massive amounts of data. With access to this kind of information, industries of all kinds will be able to reach new levels of efficiency as they add products, services, and capabilities. Unquote. So they say, at this time they were saying that 5G networks would promise to deliver data 100 times faster than 4G networks, and they would reduce latency by almost double, by 98%. Tom Wheeler, the chair of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, in 2017 made a presentation on the United States government's vision for the rollout of 5G in America. He said, quote, yes, 5G will connect the Internet of everything. If something can be connected, it will be connected in the 5G world. With hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waters, 5G is a national priority. Summer, do you think that the folks on the Trump train realize how involved Donald Trump has been in the 5G rollout?
Well, yeah, they just pick and choose.
Well,
what they want to see.
Operation Warp Speed, rolling out 5G while everything was locked down. Did anybody notice what was going on during the lockdowns? A lot of towers are being built. What were those? Retired U.S. government scientist Dr. Ronald M. Powell said in response to this, he said, the proposed 5G technology must be opposed. So he's a former government scientist. Through a 5G network and Internet of Things, and IoT, in other words, privacy and security would be next to impossible. So the dark truth is that the development of 5G networks and the various networked products that they'll give rise to in the global smart city infrastructure represent the greatest threat to freedom in the history of humanity. And we see this being played out in our schools. That's where it's being done now. Facial recognition. as well. Law enforcement facial recognition. Check this out. Check these stats out. I threw this in because there's a punitive element here, to this student surveillance. How easily it is for them to get involved with law enforcement, because part of Gaggle's setup is to notify law enforcement. At some stage, it's not very far down like if you get a couple, how many ever, there's a certain number of flags, and if someone doesn't respond, law enforcement is contacted fairly quickly. So here's a little information about that. Law enforcement face recognition. I wonder if anybody realizes how ubiquitous this is right now. Law enforcement face recognition, not just for marketing purposes, but law enforcement face recognition affects over 117 million American adults. It is also unregulated, just like the school surveillance industry.
Well, they say that there's an act that they're trying to pass for that right now.
Right. There's that was I saw in the research, reading the articles for this, that there are a lot of states and cities also who are people are fighting back, and they're trying to get trying to get facial recognition shut down. It's hard to believe much of what we read or see in the media.
Well, they are. They're making the effort to act like there's a rebellion against it, that there's a pushback.
Well, something has to happen, because 1 in 2 Americans, that's half of us, are in a law enforcement recognition, a facial recognition database. That means between you and me, one of us is in there. I think I know who it is.
Well, when I was, in Australia years ago, I was used to, when you fly in, you just walk right through.
It's you.
Yeah, they know who you are.
It's you. They got you.
They have the facial recognition.
They didn't get me. This is not my real face.
Singapore also, when I go into Singapore, they know who you are.
Singapore, that's a big lockdown there. That is a model smart city, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's rolled out around the world. We're just kind of like, the technology's all here. It's just, when are they going to pull the trigger and let everybody realize the gravity of what we've got around us now? That's the only question.
This is not my real face. This is just the one I wear for here. Law enforcement face recognition, as we said, is unregulated. And in most cases, it's out of control. So it's good that there is some pushback on this. But major face recognition systems, to this point anyway, are not audited for misuse, just like what we see with the student surveillance. Now, who we quoted earlier, John Ambrosio, he says, quote, "Resisting these neoliberal forms of accountability is crucial. It's crucial to defending the rights of students and to refusing the extension of market values and culture to education." What that means is this: we have to resist this, because they're commoditizing our kids. They're turning them into units to be bought and sold. It's going to do that to all of us eventually. Neoliberal accountability, the reason we must resist it, and the reason we can resist it is because it fails to live up to the cultural ideals that it professes to value. So, on the grounds of these contradictions, we must challenge these systems. We have to challenge their claims, challenge their discourse. We have to challenge their idea and claims that theirs are the obvious and only solutions to the problems we have. It's a compelling argument that he makes, especially given the proliferation of apps and other forms of ed tech, the use of every variety of which binds each student to a regime of data collection, aggregation, reuse, and then, of course, resale. That's the big point here. I don't think I've made clear enough. one of the major uses of this data that's collected from the kids in the schools is that it's sold, right? Information is the number one commodity today, bought and sold just like pork bellies and crude oil. And the reason they're able to do that is because of the EUAs, the end user agreements that nobody ever reads, especially kids. And you just opt right into it. These kids are opting into services they have to use to do their work and communicate with their teachers. That also opts them into having their personal information sold out to third parties. So these highly technical and legally sophisticated instruments turn students into users with a single click. It's a recontextualization that is horrifying. So what we're saying to you here is there's an unacceptable cost attached to this diffusion of surveillance technologies into the public schools, which really is a captive audience. They don't have a choice not to do it. So there are other surveillance companies. Here they are. A few of them. GoGuardian. If you want to do some research, check out these names. GoGuardian, Bark. If you want to do some research out there, we can, crowdsourcing the truth. Crowdsourcing the information, crowdsourcing this research. If you guys want to go out there and do some research on GoGuardian or Bark or Navigate 360 or Securely. Yeah, I'm sure they pronounce that securely. But this is one of those, that's one of the things that we see happen so often today was in these logos and the way they name things now, they spell them. Go ahead.
Yeah, just clever smelling.
Clever smelling.
Spelling. I was just going to say, yeah, these are like the Gaggle that we were showing you the whole time. But I was just thinking, well, yeah, it's a disenchanted world that we have here.
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier.
Have you got any more info on the fear as a marketing position?
Well, I mean, I think we pretty much covered it because I was going to go into just a study that was supporting.
Yeah, we've got the NASSP. We've got those. Those are up next.
Yeah. So it's just basically like, obviously somebody hired a research company. It's called the Gotham Research Group, an independent research firm. It was like, it was a survey conducted online January 5th through June.
Is that
23rd.
the right? Do I have the right graphic up there for you?
Yes, okay. That's the one. So 2022, and they did a sample. So among a nationally representative sample of 1,000 principals and assistant vice president principals in middle schools and high school, and then grade students, and then they were just determining, like they did all this research, and they were trying to break down just the level of, I would say, just the level of urgency. Like, here's all this really alarming news that we need to be concerned about. The majority of school leaders, 70%, and students, 51%, report that they have personally been threatened or attacked physically or verbally during the past year. So again, it's like, here's this research study, and that's very grieving if that's actually the truth, but we just have to be wise and understand that a lot of this is manipulation and playing on people's heartstrings. But, so we've got this full study that's just all about like justifying why we need these surveillance systems in schools across the nation and backing that up with stats and figures to help people be convinced, like, okay, this is happening. So.
All right. I was showing some of the graphics you had here. There's a quote from the young lady It's all about mental health, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Drew Chambers abstract from the House School Security Measures harm schools and their students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and then you've got an actual scholarly paper that basically refutes all of this and lists out reasons why surveillance on the kids is not actually a good idea, which is the logical conclusion that we can all naturally make, right? Because we can just intuit all the problems that would be, that would happen with people that are constantly under the watchful eye. And so you can see that, there's information out there to come against this. And like you said earlier, the gentleman, who was the gentleman that you were talking about earlier? The guy with the lips.
Oh, this guy was from the ACLU.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got an article from him too. It's he was actually, it's interesting because we have crossover with these organizations. So he was in this video, in this document, this coverage from Vice.
Yeah, he said that like the benefits are fictitious.
Yeah.
There are no policy adjustments that would fix it. When it comes to student surveillance and to making kids safer, it just doesn't work. The harms of it do not justify the upsides because the upsides are fictitious. So it's just having that critical eye to really see through all of this.
Yeah. He said in an article at the ACLU, it's just so funny to be reading one of their pieces in a positive light. He says, to enable an honest exploration into how we can most effectively combat school violence, massive pressure must be put on Congress to swiftly repeal the Dickian Tiahrt amendments that have allowed this. Until they are repealed and researchers at the CDC and elsewhere are empowered to study the potential link between this type of violence that we can't say on this channel, then elected officials and school administrators should resist the urge to implement school surveillance measures whose impact on school violence is spurious at best, right? Surveillance measures, the impact they have is spurious at best. As you said, fictitious. In short, we must commit ourselves to not harming our students while we are figuring out how to help them. That's funny. In that worldview, they're figuring out how to help them. The biblical worldview, we don't have to figure it out. It's plain. It's eternal truth. He says, this, of course, will require us to resist the massive marketing efforts of surveillance technology companies who are looking to profit off our fear, right? And if at long last the results of studies are allowed to come in, we can finally have a full and well-informed discussion about how we can best keep our students safe. I have an idea. Keep them at home. That's probably the best advice you're going to get all week. Here's another article, another write-up here from Education Leaders Report magazine. Some of the information we've shared with you tonight has come from this too. So as we come down the home stretch, we want to share with you a little bit about the history of education. Of course, Voddie Baucham covered that in the opening clip tonight. So there's a question we have to ask. Why is the United States education system so oppressive? How did it ever happen that they have this kind of control? And why is it that students don't learn what we think they should be learning? Why is it that the United States is still using the Prussian education system? What is it? The Prussian education system, still used to this day in most countries worldwide, originated in the early 18th century as a way to instill absolute obedience and uniformity in the students under the guise of education. What the students wanted and thought was irrelevant. The Prussian education system was there to teach them minimal literacy and to indoctrinate them into believing in the infallibility of the supreme authority, the Prussian king, Frederick William I at the time. And of course, the same thing is true today. What the school systems are doing is they're training our kids to believe in the infallibility and the supreme authority of the state. Well, the end result was a useful generic worker, readily replaceable, indispensable. What did David Rockefeller? It's old. What was the first one? I think it's David Rockefeller. Daddy Rockefeller. What was it he said? He says, I don't want a nation full of educated men. I want a nation of workers. All right. Drones. He wants a nation of drones. Teachers in the Prussian education system acted as surrogate parents that had no mercy for the child and punished all mistakes ruthlessly for the purposes of destroying trust and instilling fear. Fear at every angle. Fear is how they market this surveillance, and fear is how they get control of the children. The curriculum in the Prussian education system consisted of rote reading and writing. That means by memory. Memorization assignments that were meant to destroy the creative and spontaneous nature. The grades themselves also weren't used to measure the child's knowledge, but rather the level of its obedience. The worst grade implied the child was rebellious and refused to follow given methods rather than it was stupid or inattentive. The highly structured layout of the classroom, perhaps a Panopticon, meant pupils were disconnected from one another and easily monitored, which again emphasized the atmosphere of distrust. Even the school bell, used to mark the end and the beginning of each period, can be easily recognized as a conditioning method. Of course, later described as such by Pavlov with his dog in the late 19th century. So that's what they think of the kids, right? I think it was in the 90s where, what did you have a bell at your school, or was it a buzzer?
In elementary school, I had a bell.
Oh, but that's right. You have to watch Matrix Override to get Summers her special high school experience. You didn't have any bells there, did you? No bells or buzzers? Ah, you see there? Something's up there. They're training. She was being trained. I think she's Illuminati. I'm not sure.
No.
Sorry, I had your mic down.
You had my mic down.
I know. Yeah, I can hear you, but
well, it is late at night, so it's understandable.
Well, that is to say, anyway, that those of us who had buzzers and bells, everything is absolutely dedicated to turning a person into a robot. Homework, dress codes, school uniforms, so on. Perhaps the most accurate description of the kind of retardation that this education produces is in Kafka, The Trial.
Remember, it was like likes and dislikes now, and then now they make it to where it's likes. Can't have dislikes.
Right.
Everybody's too sensitive.
And I always I always liked to see how many thumbs down we could get. I mean, I'm not trying to get thumbs down. I'm just saying I appreciate the thumbs down. If we did something wrong, I like to know that we did something wrong. But YouTube doesn't even want us to know. They don't even want anybody to know. It's too hurtful.
It's too offensive.
Yeah. So the same system was eventually transplanted into the United States in 1843 and became the basis of the education system we see today. There were some minor changes. Instead of the king as the infallible supreme authority, the students were taught to obey the state, but everything else is the same. As an added bonus, there is a solid layer today of social justice warrior indoctrination that formed on top of our system and came to be in the last 150 years. And that is to ensure that children are not only intellectually, but sexually crippled as well. Perhaps the only exception to this system is the new STEM system. And that's due to its male dominance and reliance on hard facts. Logical positivism is the underlying system of the STEM system. But of course, social justice warriors wouldn't be social justice warriors if they didn't want gender equality in computer sciences. The tragedy of the Prussian education system is that it continues to churn out uniform, creatively stunted workers that are ideal for an 18th century Prussian labor market. Right? That's what our education system is producing. Young men and women who graduate high school, dare we say, indoctrinated. I was going to use another word, but I think I'll just hold off on that. Let's give the video a chance.
Well, the video doesn't have a chance at this point.
No, probably not. Probably not. But
although our last one is still there, so, or the last couple.
That's a good point. Yeah, let's remind everybody to please pray for this work, and if you can, we would appreciate you to support our work because we love to keep working for you. But there's just no way we can survive here on YouTube. It's just.
Yeah, it's a matter of time.
I don't know how to edit myself, even though we do try. But when I start talking, I don't know. I think it's too important not to tell you exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. But do join our backup channel, True
Please.
Normal TV. It's all one word, True Normal TV.
True Normal TV. And armoroftruth.net. You need to go there as well. I'll show those in just a moment. I'll do the due diligence, which I don't do very well. I'm not a good promoter. I'm not a businessman at all. But we're learning. The Prussian education system, well, as you said, it promotes people who are ideal for an 18th century labor market. But a nation's economy relies on having a steady supply of creative people who take risks, who can actually think critically. You know, you have to take chances. Sometimes you got to try silly things, like starting a YouTube ministry, right? And generally, you have to.
That wasn't a choice.
No, that was no. I would have never chosen to do it. That was we ended up here by the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
But
praise God.
Yes, but you have to be willing to try things, and this Prussian education system, it trains that out of kids, both personally and as well as our species overall. We need that drive to go west, and that's being trained out of our children. Otherwise, we're all going to be royally screwed.
Yeah, and it's like I've made this point before, but everyone's so highly specialized now.
Compartmentalization.
Yeah, that everyone's very helpless. A lot of people are quite helpless because they don't know how to do a wide variety of things in Western culture. So that you know.
It's true. Yoking public school students to exploitive and invasive data collection regimes inspires deep unease in observers and encouragingly, today we see even some state lawmakers. But the exact nature of the threat of surveillance remains elusive. That is to say, what kind of evil is the surveillance of public school students by private technology companies that act via opaque and idiosyncratic contracts as agents of the state? Now, this is an article from This is from Roderick Cooks at culturalanthropology.org. This is from that Evil Institutions series. Fictional models of surveillance present sinister intelligences at the center of surveillance regimes. But Roderick says, my own research shows something else, something more chaotic and less organized. Truth is, after all, stranger than fiction. Another possibility for understanding surveillance emerges from the ways that subjects of surveillance hide in plain sight. Surveillance might then be thought of as a kind of theater, a dramaturgical approach to surveillance as opposed to one reliant on surveillance as guiding fictions, as you might have seen portrayed by Orwell, Kafka, and others. My research shows that surveillance regimes demand particular kinds of performances and performers, the exchange of various tokens and displays, such that the actors involved can satisfy the demands of the system and then get on with whatever they were doing in the first place. Students compelled to report the progress of college applications on their devices uploaded gibberish documents to a content management system, knowing they would be marked as having completed a required task, because the system could only distinguish the file format and word count of an attachment. This hack spread through gossip and email. Teachers, themselves subject to new forms of surveillance, made shows of punishing student iPad users for accessing forbidden content by verbally reprimanding them and subjecting them to embarrassing inspections. Yet they rarely instituted punitive responses to the frequent, pervasive use of school computers for non-educational media consumption. School administrators, newly empowered to collect all manner of data on teachers and students via the proliferation of screens and software, balked at using such data to punish teachers for the academic performance of their students, despite the availability of clearly intelligible metrics devised specifically for that purpose. In these and many other situations, surveillance routines became decoupled from the behavior they were meant to police. Now, I do not wish to diminish the harm to human dignity of surveillance abuse. Rather, I want to open up a space to think about what modes of digital surveillance and all their guises might mean in the context of public education, particularly in minoritized communities. As Simone Brown points out, Black bodies have long been subject to pervasive, often lethal forms of surveillance. Likewise, Virginia Eubanks predicts the spread of the extreme digital surveillance to which the poor are subjected. My analysis is meant to find ways to think about the heterogeneous qualities of surveillance, its uneven coverage, its contradictions, and its incompetence, so that we might find ways to thwart the dangerous social control that is the central motif of dystopian fiction. I couldn't agree more. And it's a big complaint about the company, Gaggle, is that it does, because of the way that law enforcement gets involved fairly quickly, it certainly does cause certain demographics to be singled out. Now, eventually, that's going to be all of us. We're all going to be living in the ghetto. Digital ghettos are where we live now. Eventually, that's going to move out into the smart city. And smart city will be a ghetto. It might not look like ghettos you're used to thinking about, but it will be one, nonetheless. So as we come into the conclusion tonight, we want to look at this argument, right? As long as one life is saved, right? Everybody would line up behind this thing if it was saving a young person's life, because that would be, who's gonna say no to that, right? We all want to save somebody's life. But this is always the argument that they use. It's always the argument that's made about any kind of surveillance that has to do with crime or destruction or violence. We cannot just simply turn over whenever someone brings that explanation to us, as long as it saves one life. We need to think about the consequences of using these kinds of surveillance technologies on students. One of Gaggle's central selling points is that it saves hundreds of lives each year. For the 2018-2019 school year, it claimed that it prevented 722 students from committing hara-kiri. When asked to explain, Gaggle said that out of the 52,000 references it flagged, 6,000 of them were serious enough that Gaggle called the school immediately. Of those, 722 were so specific that, quote, we identify them as a life saved, Gaggle said. Oh, really? And so when BuzzFeed asked Gaggle, what do you mean by specific? A company spokesperson responded and said, A, specific means that they have heard back from the district that a life was saved. Or B, that what the student wrote included a clear and definitive plan, to go through with the act. Specific place and time were mentioned and the reason for it. Or C, both. So all kinds of room for vagaries there. Gaggle's claim is impossible to verify. Right? But it works. It works on people. Because we're talking about life and death. But you can't verify anything they say, especially since their system flags just about anything and everything. Between July 2018 and June of this year, for example, Gaggle flagged, or June of 2019, this was back then, Gaggle flagged 447 cases of questionable content and 31 possible student situations, the PSS, including possible taking of life, in one Illinois school district. According to 500 pages of emails from the school district, many of the documents flagged by Gaggle appear to be creative writing or expository writing. Items flagged for demonstrating a risk of taking one's life or self-harm often had titles like poem portfolio or possible poems or narrative essay or something like that, or college application entrance essay. One of the things Gaggle is teaching is children to not share things, which is presumably the opposite of what mental health professionals would say is good. If a student is afraid of being interviewed by school administrators, they may shut themselves off from adults altogether. It's unclear, based on the emails alone, whether Gaggle was truly helpful as a tool in assisting vulnerable students. In several email chains, teachers and administrators were already aware that these children were struggling and were already in touch with the parents of the students in question. So our point that we want to make here is it is unethical to use fear to market a product that the children have no choice not to use. It's unethical to use fear this way, to market a product that can show no real value other than collecting and disseminating someone's personal information. The UCLA professor we mentioned earlier said, quote, I have more faith in relationships that could be built locally and interpersonally than these far removed through content moderators and through for-profit revenue-driven systems in terms of thinking about the safety of children. Gaggle claims that its safety representatives moderate content 24 hours, 7 days a week, every day of the year. So if Gaggle flags imminent threats of suicide between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. Central Time, a safety representative will try to alert school administrators by phone. If they can't reach anyone, safety representatives are told to call the local police. Escalating the situation. Is that a good idea? It's not a wise decision. Mental health experts say if it really helped to escalate the situation, then we would always escalate situations. The reality is that these actions have consequences in the real world for real human beings. There are negative impacts as a result of these interventions. Roberts expressed concern at the policy of having a human being reviewing every piece of content that could be flagged by Gaggle's internal AI tools. She said that seems like a gross mismatch. I wouldn't want a stranger poring over the communications and engagement of my children, but I wouldn't want it taking place fully online anyway, because you know it. Again, it poses so many questions that I think the tools themselves are ill-equipped. Invoices, letters of intent, and receipts from 17 cities show that the company charges school districts tens of thousands of dollars for its services each academic year. That depends on how many students were in the district and how many premium services a school was to choose. So the annual fees could range from about $12,000 to more than $60,000 for a single academic year. According to trade publication Smart Brief, schools can tap into hefty amounts of federal money to pay for this student surveillance. Of course, right? The federal government is there to help. Under Title IV of the 2015 Every Student Succeeds Act, school districts may use more than $30,000 of federal money, according to whatever the need is, in order to fund various vaguely defined initiatives. Schools that receive more than $30,000 under ESSA must dedicate at least 20% of it in order to fund well-rounded education. What is that? At least 20% of it needs to be spent on safe and healthy activities for students and some undefined amount of money toward technology. So it's a question of values. It's a question of how do we value our children? It's a question of where we collectively as a society want to spend our money, Robert said. We can't even get on board to funding school lunches, and yet we're going to give massive amounts of money to enrich these companies who are spying on our kids. All right, so let's get this. There we go. So here's the argument. If it saves even one life, we'll hear this from one of the district officers here. Here you go.
Interview, Lamond left the district to join a school safety company.
If you'd had a tool like Gaggle in place, would anything have been different?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Do you think these kinds of tools would have changed any past incidents or could have changed anything in the past?
Sorry, I can't speculate.
Do you think those kinds of triggers or alerts are treated more seriously or responded to with more higher levels of protocols if they're flagged by a third-party company like Gaggle?
So what I'll share is we have threat assessment policies that are nationally normed. And what we've done in Oxford is we've sort of changed the way in which we respond to potential concerning behavior. And so where something before would have gone through threat assessment if it was a threat, like the name suggests, now we're looking at all concerning behavior as though it is a threat. When it comes to our response and our threat assessment, I am hoping that we can sort of level that off in the coming years, but I would rather overanalyze than underanalyze student behavior right now.
So even if that means 99% of the alerts you get are nothing, they're like a homework assignment, would it still be worth it for you?
Absolutely. If we save even one student, it's worth all the time and energy we're putting into it.
And there you have it. If we save even one student, it's worth all of it. But where is the evidence that student surveillance does more good than harm? As student surveillance has increased over time, we've shown you here tonight that, I was about to say that word again, bang bangs in schools and
that was funny.
Yeah, and taking of life personally, these things have also increased. In other words, everything that they say they exist to stop or slow down have done nothing but increase every year that they've been that this surveillance has been involved. In fact, here's a quick example for you of just how people who want to commit acts like this are going to get it done. Gosh, there it is. Here we go. How a teen got a bang bang past school metal detectors. We have to talk like that. It's silly, I know, but anyway, this platform. So we'll see if this works without playing an ad. Please don't play an ad. We don't want to have to sit through that. But this is from Akron, Ohio. Now, Akron, Ohio is also one, this district is one of the districts where there are, now they are training employees, school employees, to be armed. Here we go.
Procedures and protocols, very spotty, because they're the very old technology, they're older units.
Monday's meeting follows the discovery of a gun inside.
Your speakers are not broken. That's this video for somehow it goes left and right like that.
The school after a 17-year-old Firestone student was escorted to his locker 2 hours before a basketball game at the school.
Another student did open the door after school in between the events and allow that student to enter the building with that gun, and then placed it in a locker, then went through the metal detection system into the basketball game.
One of the administrators escorted him there and immediately noticed him handling his coat in a fashion that didn't look consistent with anything, drew her suspicion about what he was doing. And in very short order, she saw a handgun, loaded handgun, in fact.
The incident just days after a 7th grader was also discovered to have a gun inside the attached Litchfield Middle School. Akron School Board President, in a statement to Fox 8 News earlier, said the board shares the concerns of our community regarding recent incidents and are committed to incorporating an open and transparent process of identifying institutional and community-based solutions.
And in the context of these guns being taken in the schools, why aren't these guns secured? Where are they getting them from? I'm sure not all are coming from the home, right? So there's obviously access to these weapons out in the community, and that's the problem.
The Firestone student placed in juvenile custody, charged with carrying a concealed weapon and illegal conveyance. Superintendent Christine Fowler-Mack last week saying soon she wants to be able to have new high-tech metal detection equipment in place every day at Akron schools.
Well, of course. Yeah, they didn't go. They went around them.
Well, and it just sounds like a jail.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And let me just show you. Here's the other
request.
Here's the article that goes with this. Oh no, I can't close this thing. There we go. So the article, an article that comes along with this one. How long employees will have to train to be armed in school in Ohio. Same district where this happened. They're training these school employees to be armed. So
yeah, I mean, because you also think about like the IRS is now going to be packing heat too.
Yeah, well, they have an army,
right? So these guys are being weaponized. The IRS is being weaponized. It sounds like there's a bit of an organized alliance going on right now.
Oh, we're at war.
Mm-hmm.
I probably shouldn't say that too much. I said it.
Yeah.
The church is at war. I'll put it that way. It's just going to happen. We're going to face persecution. So the question is this: we have to ask: that's what we came here to do, was to decide whether or not this is worth it. Is it worth it?
Death works.
Right. The answer is no, it's not. As we described the other night on our show, death works is when one culture destroys all the symbols of a previous culture. And here, we see the innocence of youth being destroyed this way by turning our children into commodities.
And also allowing them to possibly be able to elect their own medically assisted suicide, right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, in Canada, I mean, it's weird. It's a strange world. So, folks, the Christian worldview is the one that's true. It's the one that has all the answers. Voddie Baucham was plain stated at the opening of this show. And so our question that we want to answer as we close tonight is it worth it? They're telling you that we have to do it. Is it worth it? No, it's not worth it. Shocker. Student surveillance can't be made better. It doesn't work. We can see that, according to Gaggle's own data, the rate of these incidents that they claim to be preventing are just increasing every year. At the same time, that surveillance is rising, is being used more and more and becoming more and more invasive. So the more restrictions they put on, the higher these events go. So what gives? In fact, why is it that over the past few years, with health scares and whatever else, and this, why are we so afraid to die? Thanatophobia is the fear of death. It comes from the Greek word thanatos, which means death, and phobos, which means fear. It means panic and terror. It became a common word for fear, phobos, via the notion of panic and flight, or to run. When you look at the origin of the word thanatos, going back to the Proto-Indo-European linguistics, you find a word duene, which means to disappear or die. Perhaps from an earlier root meaning dark or cloudy. And then you add the prefix a, which means not, and you get athanatos, or without death, or immortal, to not disappear. So you also can see in the word euthanasia the prefix eu, which means good. It gives the idea of a good or a happy death. Or more accurately, in our modern context, an easy or painless death, or to put one out of their misery. To leave behind the misery and suffering of the declining, corrupted flesh. So it's easy to see from the origins of these words that death has always been a primary fear in man. Everyone fears death. Religious leaders, scholars, authors, artists, filmmakers, they all plumb the depths of fear often. Marketers especially. The fear of death is so common that there's a field of study called thanatology, examining our reactions to death and dying. Studies show that men are less likely to fear death, or at least to admit to it. And it's probably due to the fact that women are more likely to admit their fears. So we break down our general fear of death into different categories. It's fear of pain and suffering, which is common in healthy people as well as people dying of disease. It's fear of the unknown. Death remains the ultimate unknown for many. According to scientific materialist scientists, the ones who are running our schools now, who claim to be objective on the matter, no one in human history has survived death to tell us what really happens after the body dies. However, we know, Christians, we know this is not the case. The Christian worldview answers this and all other relevant existential inquiries. That said, we can say for certain, at least at this time, that death cannot be fully understood by anyone who is living. It's true that many people of faith also worry that their belief in an afterlife isn't real after all. They have doubts. Or most people who have a false belief feel like they didn't earn eternal life while they were alive. Thank God for clearing this up for us. Fear of eternal punishment. Now that is a healthy fear. It's similar to the fear of non-existence. This belief doesn't apply only to devout believers of religious or spiritual faith. Many people, regardless of their religious persuasion or lack of spiritual beliefs, fear that they will be punished for what they did or did not do while here on earth. Probably most common, though, is the fear of loss of control. Death remains something over which we have absolutely no control, and it frightens many people. Some may attempt to exert some form of control over death. Even the state may decide that they're going to be in charge of how and when people die. Some people may decide to live in an extremely careful manner to avoid risks. They may wear masks and gloves wherever they go, get frequent health checks, perhaps adopt an unhealthy preoccupation with avoiding illness and death, which we see everywhere now. Very common today as a result of a massive campaign of fear that has come mostly from the media, world governments. My friends, brothers, and sisters, safety is not a virtue. Life is a terminal condition, and we all have it. Death is the only guarantee that you have in this life. To avoid all risk or to be preoccupied with safety is slavery to the world. Fear of man is a snare, and safety is not a virtue. Gaining a proper understanding of who you are, why you're here, how did you get here, and where are you going? That's the healthy way to deal with this reality. Only the Christian worldview answers all of these questions. A healthy understanding of death, holding the worldview that is true, causes us to make the most of our time here on earth and to not be preoccupied, obsessed with protecting ourselves at the cost of living our lives. To not take our relationships for granted. George Bernard Shaw said this. He said, I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Now, that's from an unbeliever. Imagine applying that attitude within the Christian worldview. And that would be the formula for truly good works. Why does the world fear death? Because all know, or at least sense, that there is some responsibility we have. Ecclesiastes 3. The attempt to ignore this reality is common, but it's undeniable. Romans chapter 1 tells us that all are aware of this state of affairs, that there is a God, a creator, that we are responsible to. So I would just say to you as we finish up tonight, stay encouraged. This is our reminder to stand firm on God's word. Christ lives today. And if you don't know him, and these words mean something to your heart, you feel somehow encouraged or drawn, maybe God is calling you right now, effectually calling you. And when he does call you, it's irresistible. Answer that call. Get to know Jesus Christ today so that you can have peace in the middle of this crazy nonsense. Okay, my dear, that'll be our show for tonight. Would you like to leave the folks with an uplifting message?
Well, actually, I was going to ask if you maybe wanted to read Psalm 27 to everybody as a send-off.
Psalm 27, that's a great idea. I wonder why you came up with that one.
It's one that's really moved me this week.
Were you studying that one today?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's do Psalm 27, and we'll play you out from there. So God bless you, my friends, and we'll see you next time. And here is Psalm 27, Psalm of David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversary and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army surrounds me, my heart shall not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing have I asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of our Lord and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. And I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. You have said, seek my face. My heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. Hide not your face from me. Turn not your servant away in anger. O you who have been my help, cast me not off. Forsake me not, O God of my salvation. For my father and mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me in. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they breathe out violence. I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord.